A truck payment can do something that even a bad job sometimes cannot do. It can turn a good income into a trapped life. That is the first truth. Most people think the danger in buying an expensive vehicle is that it costs a lot. That is not the real danger. A lot of things cost a lot. A house can cost a lot and still help you. Education can cost a lot and still help you. A business can cost a lot and still help you. The real danger is when a purchase creates a chrome cage. I want you to picture that clearly. The outside is polished. The seats are soft. The dashboard glows. The paint shines like money itself. From the road, it looks like freedom. From the inside, if the financing is wrong, it is a cage. You keep feeding it every month. You build your budget around it. You rearrange your life to keep it happy. You think you own it because your name is on the paperwork. In reality, it owns a growing share of your future labor. That is not transportation. That is servitude with cup holders. The transcript you gave me is not really about trucks. It is about a modern system that makes impossible payments feel normal, then teaches ordinary people to confuse those payments with adulthood, identity, and success. The truck is just the most visible costume. Underneath it is the same old machine, monthly, payment hypnosis, negative equity, traps, status, pressure, loan. Term distortion, insurance drag, fuel drag, maintenance drag, opportunity, cost blindness. The machine is not designed to ask, will this build your future? It is designed to ask, can we make this monthly number feel survivable for a few more years? That is the kind of question cages ask. A free person asks a different question. A free person asks, what does this purchase do to my next decade? That is the question I want you to ask, because most people do not buy the vehicle that fits their life. They buy the vehicle that fits their fantasy and then force their life to kneel down around the payment. That is backward, and backward financial thinking gets dressed up beautifully in the auto market. You have seen it. The giant truck gleaming on the highway, chrome everywhere. Tires that look like they were built for mountains, even though the owner mostly drives to work. The grocery store, and maybe a youth soccer field payment bigger than old rent. Insurance bigger than some grocery budgets. Fuel bill that would have looked insane 15 years ago, yet millions of ordinary people sign the papers anyway. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, mechanics, office employees, people with regular jobs and regular stress and regular futures. They are not secret millionaires. They are just stepping into a system that has been optimized to make the cage door feel like a reward. That is why this topic matters so much. It is not about judging what somebody drives. It is about recognizing one of the most efficient wealth destruction machines in ordinary life. The system starts with the oldest sales trick in consumer finance. It gets you to stop looking at price and start looking at monthly sedation. If I tell you a truck costs $55,000, your brain may still have a fighting chance. It may ask a real question. Do I need this? Do I want to turn that much capital into a depreciating object? What happens if I instead keep driving something reliable and invest the difference? There is still oxygen in the room. So the system removes the oxygen. It does not want you thinking about price. It wants you thinking about monthly survivability, $800 a month, $900, maybe $1,200 if it is really loaded. Those numbers sound brutal, but they feel less brutal than $55,000 all at once, and far less brutal than the true all, in ownership cost over 7 years. That is how the cage gets built, not with lies, exactly, with framing, with a monthly number that feels heavy but somehow still survivable if you move a few things around. Survivable is a terrible standard for a wealth decision. A payment can be survivable and still be poison. That is what so many people miss. The payment is not being judged against the right benchmark. It is being judged against this month's feelings instead of the next 7 years of freedom. That is why I call it monthly payment hypnosis. The system does not need you to think it is wise. It only needs you to believe it is manageable. Manageable is how cages get normalized. Then the second bar slides into place extended loan terms. This is one of the cleverest distortions in consumer finance because it turns a huge mistake into something that looks almost responsible. Spread the loan over 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, in some cases even 10. Suddenly, the monthly payment comes down enough that the buyer can say, "See, I'm not being reckless. I found the responsible structure. Number, you found a longer chain. Length is not responsibility. Length is often just diluted pain. The transcript lays this out plainly. Stretch a truck purchase across 8 years and the monthly number falls, but the total amount paid rises dramatically. You are not escaping cost. You are giving the cage more years to feed on you. That lower payment is bought with time, interest, and the near certainty that the vehicle's value will collapse faster than the debt balance. That is how a person ends up making payments on something that stopped feeling exciting years ago while still owing more than it is worth. That is the third bar, negative equity. And negative equity is not just a finance term, it is a psychological prison. Once you owe more than the vehicle is worth, the cage stops being theoretical. You cannot sell cleanly. You cannot trade cleanly. You cannot walk away cleanly to escape. You need cash. Most trap buyers do not have it. So the negative balance gets rolled forward into the next vehicle, which means the next cage starts with an old chain already attached. This is one of the ugliest loops in consumer life. The owner is no longer just paying for the truck in the driveway. He is also paying for parts of the truck that is already gone, that is not ownership, that is rolling captivity. The transcript describes this cycle accurately. People buy on long loans, grow tired of the car after a few years, still owe too much, and then fold the difference into an even bigger new loan. Dealers love this because a trapped buyer is a repeat buyer. The customer calls it upgrading. The spreadsheet calls it compounding stupidity. You have to understand how dangerous that is. A single overpriced vehicle can injure your future. A negative equity cycle can consume it. Then the fourth bar closes, and this is where the cage becomes emotional instead of merely mathematical. Identity, the truck, is not sold as transportation. It is sold as a declaration: rugged, successful, reliable, capable, masculine, powerful. The ads do not show a man driving to the pharmacy and then waiting in traffic outside a strip mall. They show mountains, dirt, adventure, work ethic, status without saying the word status. The buyer is not invited to ask, what is the cost of ownership? He is invited to ask, what kind of man am I? That is a very dangerous question to attach to debt. Because once identity enters the room, arithmetic becomes harder to hear. A person will fight to protect a financial mistake if that mistake is wearing the costume of self-worth. Tell him the truck is too expensive, and he may hear, you are not the kind of man who deserves this. Tell a family they would be stronger in a reliable used vehicle, and they may hear, your success is fake. Tell a high earner that the luxury SUV is destroying the wedge between income and wealth, and he may hear, all your hard work should look smaller. This is how the cage defends itself. The buyer begins protecting the bars. That is why the transcript's central psychological point matters so much. The auto industry has become expert at selling social meaning. The machine does not ask you to buy steel. It asks you to buy narrative. It asks you to finance a version of yourself. Once people do that, rational analysis feels like personal attack. Now the cage is almost complete. The monthly number is hypnotizing you. The loan term is lengthening the chain. The negative equity risk is locking the door. The identity story is teaching you to love the bars. All that remains is to make the rest of life kneel around the payment. And that is exactly what ordinary households do. This is where the transcript becomes especially useful, because it stops pretending the payment exists in isolation. People do not just pay for the truck. They restructure their lives around the truck. Smaller apartment, delayed travel, extra roommates, no restaurant spending, second jobs, side gig on weekends. Credit cards carrying the rest of the household because cash has to be preserved for the vehicle note. In severe cases, even retirement withdrawals or loans against 401k. S just to keep the machine alive. The truck becomes both the master and the excuse. That is when the cage becomes almost theatrical. A person starts driving for ride, share or delivery work in the expensive truck to help pay for the expensive truck. He uses the object of wealth destruction as the tool to subsidize the wealth destruction. That is the kind of loop that should make you laugh until you realize how common it is. Then it stops being funny because it reveals the deeper truth. The purchase was never affordable. It was only financeable. That is a massive difference. A thing is affordable when it fits inside a strong life without forcing sacrifice from more important categories. A thing is financeable when a lender can find a way to stretch the pain across enough months that the buyer says yes. Most cages are financeable, very few are affordable. And the difference between those two words decides a shocking amount of a person's future wealth. The transcript also goes where many people refuse to go. It counts the invisible bars, insurance, fuel, maintenance, repairs, gap coverage, extended warranties. The cage is not just the note is merely the front gate. Once you drive the thing home, the supporting costs begin feeding on cash flow in ways people consistently underestimate. A more expensive vehicle needs more expensive insurance. A big truck or loaded SUV can push premiums above $200 a month for one vehicle and far higher for a household stacking several expensive cars. Fuel on a thirsty truck can look like an old car payment by itself. Repairs and maintenance on modern oversized vehicles are not minor annoyances. A brake job can cross into four figures. Transmission issues can climb into several thousand. Major engine work can feel like a medical emergency. This is where the cage becomes structurally unfair. The owner is not only making a high monthly payment on a depreciating object, he is also insuring a depreciating object heavily, feeding a depreciating object constantly, and repairing a depreciating object expensively. Then at the end of the cycle, the object is worth a fraction of what the total spending would have bought elsewhere. This is why I despise the way many people talk about car payments. They speak as if transportation cost begins and ends with the note. That is childish accounting. The real question is total ownership burn. The transcript S-truck example makes the point brutally. A $55,000 truck financed over 7 years at 6% may create an $800 monthly note. Fine. Now add roughly $250 a month for insurance, add around $350 for fuel, add realistic maintenance and repair. Over 7 years, you are not looking at $55,000 anymore. You are looking at well over $130,000 of total transportation burn, with maybe $15,000 of residual value left if you are lucky. That is not a machine for building a future. That is a machine for setting one on fire slowly. I want you to sit with that. $130,000 burned to end with an old truck and a pile of lost compounding. That is not a lifestyle choice. That is capital execution. Now let us talk about the alternative cost, because this is the ghost that cages try very hard to keep out of sight. Opportunity cost: the money did not merely vanish, it could have become an asset base. This is where the transcript gets to the most important line in the whole piece, the same $800 a month. If invested in a simple productive structure, can become something like $70,000 after 7 years at a reasonable return assumption. That means the true cost of the truck is not only what you paid to own and operate it, it is also what you did not build, because the cage consumed the contribution stream that could have been feeding the future. This is why I dislike expensive vehicles so much when people buy them at the wrong stage, not because cars are evil, not because comfort is evil, not because all spending should be gray and joyless, but because the early and middle years of wealth building are sensitive years. Every monthly stream matters. Every recurring obligation either thickens your future or thins it. If you direct $800, $1,200 or more into a depreciating status object during those years, you are not just buying the truck. You are declining a future pile of productive assets and calling the trade neutral. It is not neutral. It is one of the most aggressive forms of wealth leakage in ordinary life. The real horror of the chrome cage is that it teaches people to mistake appearance for position. From the street, the truck says success. From the spreadsheet, the truck often says vulnerability. The owner looks prosperous. The owner may actually be living on cereal and hope. The driveway looks expensive. The balance sheet may be starving. This is why I say the cage is chrome. It shines hardest exactly where it weakens you most. Then comes another layer of the trap that families rarely notice until too late. Multiple cages. The transcript points out something that should bother you deeply. Many households do not just have one giant payment. They have 2 or 3: truck for dad, SUV for mom, another vehicle for the teenager, the second job, or the weekend identity project. Suddenly, the household is running an internal auto finance company, except every asset is depreciating, and every obligation is monthly. Insurance multiplies, registration multiplies, maintenance multiplies, fuel multiplies. Due dates multiply. The household gets very skilled at juggling payments and very bad at recognizing what the whole circus is costing them. This is how upper middle class fragility gets built, not with obvious collapse, with organized overpayment. People become proud of keeping all the plates spinning, when the real victory would have been refusing to spin so many plates in the first place. That is a lesson that reaches far beyond cars. Now, I want to tell you the most important thing the transcript implies, but does not drive hard enough. The cage is not about transportation. It is about status management under financial illiteracy. A reliable used sedan can transport you. A modest used pickup can transport you. A 10-year-old SUV can transport your children. The difference between those and the 6-figure chrome monument is not utility on most days. It is emotional theater. It is how you want to feel when you walk up to it. It is what you want neighbors, coworkers, or strangers at a stoplight to assume about you. It is the fantasy that this object proves your effort mattered. That fantasy is expensive because it never ends with the first purchase. Status hunger is not satisfied by one good vehicle. It usually expands. That is why I prefer what I call status delay. Drive the boring thing longer than your ego likes. Build the asset base first. Make your investments impressive before your driveway is. Let the compounding happen where almost nobody can see it. That is how you stay out of cages. Some people hear that and think, I am calling for deprivation. I am not. I am calling for sequencing. The problem is not that no one should ever buy a nice vehicle. The problem is that people buy a nice vehicle while their capital base is too small. Their emergency fund is too weak. Their retirement accounts are underfed. Their high-interest debt is still breathing. And their future optionality is fragile. In that condition, the vehicle is not an enjoyment upgrade. It is a freedom downgrade. That is the correct language. If the truck makes you need the paycheck more, it reduced freedom. If the SUV forces you to keep saying yes to work you hate, it reduced freedom. If the luxury car delays debt payoff, emergency reserves, and asset ownership, it reduced freedom. I do not care how pretty the interior is. Reduced freedom is a bad trade. This is why I want you to think in 2 ledgers. The first is the cash ledger. What does the payment do each month? The second is the freedom ledger. What does this obligation require from the next 7 years of my life? How many days of work? How many delayed choices? How much postponed investing? How much reduced room for error? How much extra obedience? Those are the right questions. They are much better than, can I technically fit it into my budget if I stretch the term and live a little tighter? That is the language of captivity. And captivity always sounds reasonable when described monthly. That is why the final escape is not really about buying a different car. It is about changing the mental rule. Stop asking whether the lender can make the payment feel survivable. Start asking whether the purchase strengthens or weakens your future asset base. Stop asking what the truck says about you now. Start asking what the missing investment stream says about you 10 years from now. Stop asking whether other people seem to be affording it. Start asking whether they are affording it in a way you would actually want to imitate. Most are not. The transcript is right to say these people are not mysteriously wealthy. They are using longer terms, emotional justification, trade, in-games, hidden supporting debt, and sometimes outright financial self-harm to make the cage look drivable. That is not a model. It is a warning label. So here is the standard I want you to use. A vehicle is a tool first, a status story second, if at all. A strong tool should move you efficiently without eating the seed capital that could have built future power. A weak tool, dressed as identity, will consume capital, expand obligations, and then ask for applause while doing it. Do not applaud cages, use tools. That is the whole discipline. And if you are already inside one, be honest enough to say so. No pride. No embarrassment, just truth. Truth is cheaper than 7 more years of pretending. Run the full ownership numbers, count insurance, count fuel, count repairs, count the opportunity cost, count what the payment is doing to your emergency fund, your retirement contributions, your brokerage, your housing choices, your sleep. Then ask the only question that matters. Does this vehicle carry me or am I carrying it? Because once that answer becomes honest, the chrome starts looking very different. And that is often the first moment the cage door opens. And I want to leave you with one last brutal comparison. A disciplined person in an old paid for sedan can look ordinary while quietly building reserves, retirement assets, brokerage capital, and real negotiating power. A trapped person in a glittering truck can look impressive while borrowing against the next repair, delaying investing again, and rehearsing excuses for why the numbers still work. From outside, the second life often looks richer. From inside, the first life is usually far freer. That is why you must stop evaluating vehicles the way the culture tells you to evaluate them. Not by shine, not by horsepower, not by trim package, not by whether the neighbors notice. Evaluate them by what they do to your balance sheet, your monthly breathing room, your future compounding, and your ability to choose the next chapter of your life without begging a lender, a boss, or a dealership to make the numbers fit. If the purchase narrows your world, it is not a reward, it is a cage with better lighting.